It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. What's up? What's happening? Craig Hoffman here. Logan Paulsen there. And joining us later in the show, Logan's broadcast partner, one of the two of them, for the preseason games for the Commanders, Chick Hernandez, doing the play-by-play. Got to catch up with Mr. Chick a little bit earlier. By the way, you will hear the origin story of the nickname Mr. Chick. I didn't know the story. I just assumed that's what people called him because he's been around for a hot second doing this. And just a respect for a guy who's been in it for a minute. No, there's a true origin story for Mr. Chick. So that you'll hear before his phone overheated. So we have about 15 minutes with Chick. That will end abruptly, but that's all right. It's really good stuff from Chick getting ahead of the game on Friday. We will, of course, talk about the game on Friday in just a little bit, but Logan, a good old-fashioned Washington football controversy. Coach says something. Media goes nuts. Fans go nuts. I host a radio show imploring everyone to not be so damn dramatic. Sure. But at the end of the day, Ron Rivera says some players had come to him about Eric Bieniemy's intensity. He clarified the comments today as if to say, like, look, at the end of the day, like they went to Eric, they talked it out, we're all on the same page. This is great. He does regret what I thought was a bit of a sloppy comparison to himself and Jack Del Rio and their head coaching experience. Ron clarifies today. You saw the comments yesterday. You've seen all the reaction. As a former player, as an analyst who's been in a lot of locker rooms, what do you make of it all?
I mean, surprise, surprise, I don't think it's that big of a deal. You know, that's kind of my thing on this. Like, it's, you know, especially now, like with certain colleges and the college situation, players coming directly out of college, guys don't get coached the same way in college. And that's just a fact, right? Because of the transfer portal, guys can leave if things aren't going well. And here in the NFL, obviously, you don't have that luxury. It's like here or nothing. And so I think kind of understanding a harder style of coaching is probably to be expected, right? Like, especially if you went to a program where that wasn't a thing in college. Like, even when I was coming out, like I went to UCLA and everyone was pretty middle of the road in terms of intensity. Like, obviously EB was there when I was in UCLA, so I saw hard coaching. So when I came to the NFL, you know, there were certain coaches like that coached me very, very hard, and I had to adjust to that. And it does take an adjustment period, but at least I knew that style of coaching existed in the coaching universe. And I think there's a lot of kids now, guys that I train and stuff, where it's like, you know, it's sunshine and daisies all the time. And that's just not true of the NFL. And so I think understanding the standard that EB has, understanding the passion that EB has is probably going to take an adjustment period. And like, you know, and I get that. And I think it's like any work environment. If you have an issue, like go talk to your boss. And that's basically what happened. And like that's happened to me in my career. Not that I felt I needed to go talk to somebody, but other people went and talked to the coach that was in question. And that's life, man. Like, you got to learn how to deal with different personalities and deal with different leadership styles. And like, you know, again, like, and I think Ron was just in his comparison to him and Jack, like they've learned over the course of a very, very long coaching career, being in positions as a coordinator, as a head coach, of how to like manage personalities just a little bit better. Like, you talk to EB for 5 seconds and you realize he is a very uncompromising dude. And that's something that I respected about him when I played. It's something I respect about him now. So to me, this is just like this. Ron basically said a bunch of facts that right. I think, and then now everyone's freaking out about it. Like, it doesn't mean that locker rooms screwed up. It doesn't mean that everyone hates EB. It's learning to deal with different types of people.
Right. It was so incredibly human, and people got so mad about it. And I don't get it. And the thing, these players are soft. No, they just hadn't been coached like that before, and they didn't really. The thing that I don't get, Logan, is like, we can talk about all this soft, this like personality, that like there's an efficacy thing here in terms of how effective is Eric Bieniemy going to be as a coach, and how receptive. Not because they're quote unquote soft or because they can't take it, but because they truly don't understand what is being communicated to them, whether it is because of how, or like if Eric just yells the same thing over and over again at them, because these are very fast-paced practices like we've talked about a lot, and there's not a lot of room to sit down and talk things out and explain the why, which is something that Eric firmly believes in, that if they weren't getting that, if they weren't getting something they were supposed to, like going and trying to create understanding from perhaps a different source, their head coach, who they might have been more familiar with, is fine. And Ron was like, yeah, you need to go talk to Eric. They do. They get on the same page. Like, that's good. And that's what I just don't get about this is it seemed like people – I think people get confused with my take sometimes because I'm very consistent as like an ideologue. Like, I think certain things are true. And when I think that even a person who I might not think highly of does something correct, I'll say it. And when someone who I do think highly of screws up, I'll say that too. And instead, people want me to, or are used to like, I don't want to call it agendas, but like folks who just have a certain opinion on certain people. And no matter what they do, they will crush them if they don't like them or praise them if they do. And like, I don't think Ron Rivera is the greatest head coach that's ever walked the planet. I think anyone that's listened to me for any length of time knows that. I think Eric Bieniemy is a really, really good offensive coordinator. And so when I didn't just immediately, quote unquote, defend EB as if there's anything that even needed defending, and I actually said there wasn't a huge problem with Rivera, like people freaked out. And I think that's a lot of what's happening here is there was this rush to defend Eric when there was no actual need, and a rush to crush Rivera because people don't like him or don't think he's good. And that created a firestorm around, as you said, a bunch of facts being said pretty mundanely into a microphone.
Yeah, in some ways, I thought it was really nice to get that kind of candor from the coach. You know, like these are like people. You know, Kyle Shanahan is a great example of this. Kyle Shanahan is one of the most detailed, like no nonsense, like high standard coaches that I've ever played for. Early in his career, like, and he'll tell you this, he had a very hard time adjusting to players because his standard was here, and he would communicate things to here. And if you couldn't meet him there, he was going to be very aggressive about it, you know, like quite frankly. And so, you know, like it's kind of that idea, like you have to match my tempo. And I remember talking to him right after he left Washington. I said, you know, why don't you go be a head coach? There's head coaching opportunities, blah, blah, blah. He said, I'm not ready to deal with like the personalities yet. I need to mature a little bit. And that is a part of the coaching process and journey that I think is so important. And so, you know, like, yeah, man, like I like EB. I would say, I go as far as I love EB. Like he was awesome. You know, when I was at UCLA, like he was the guy that recruited me, like one of these recruiting coordinator into UCLA. We were only there for a year, but like the way he coaches people and the standard he holds people to is awesome. But it's abrasive as heck. You know what I mean? It's like, it's aggressive, and it's like, be here, meet me where I want to be met. And it's like, and it teaches you stuff about yourself, teaches you how to grow up. It's great, but it is hard to deal with if you've never seen it before. So nothing in there is weird. And I think it's good that EB, you know, like has to kind of learn how to communicate. And that's all part of being a coordinator in the process. So I don't think this is an issue at all. I think EB's great. I think Ron's great. I think this is, regardless of what you think about Ron or EB, this situation is like a nothing situation, in my opinion. And I'm sure people in the comments are going to freak out about it, but like these are people interacting with each other and dealing with different leadership styles. And that happens at work, it happens in my new job. It happens with you, I'm sure. Like, it's just part of life, you know? So,
yeah. And the thing is too, like, some of the comments that like I've gotten on my channel on some of the commentary I did on this on Tuesday, like, well, I have a boss that was my way or the highway. And I'm like, did you like working for the guy? Yeah. Like, you know, did he actually get the best out of you?
Sure.
Yes, no, probably not. Probably went home and was like, yeah, boss sucked again today. So, like, do you want that experience for the players when the goal is to win, right? You want to get the actual best out of them. And whether they, you know, go home and like, damn, EB really was on me again today or not, like the question is, did he get on you and then actually get the most out of you, or did he just get on you and make you mad and kind of shut down and not actually get anything good out of you? Which is why I think what Eric said yesterday was so important, where he's like, you know, I will get on you, but I'm also going to be number one fan. And some guys don't even want to hear that. Some guys I'm cheering for, and they're like, I don't want to hear that. Like, just tell me if I mess up. And it's like, you know, and that's the thing is like, there is this adjustment to being constantly at 10, but I think it's an adjustment this team needs. And I think so too. I think Ron thinks that, which is why he brought Eric in. I think a lot of key players believe that, which is why they're bought in. And that's the thing is like, it's creating that buy-in, which is happening. It's not, and Ron clarified that Wednesday morning, But I fully understood what he meant when his original comments on
Yeah.
Tuesday, that there is a level of buy-in that is not instantaneous because it is kind of shocking to the system.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like, I agree. Like, I knew when he said it, I was like, oh, that's going to be a story. Which in
Yeah.
that case, if you want to criticize Rivera and do the very silly theater commentary about this, fine. But hear me out, everybody out there freaking out. What if we just all went, instead of going, oh, that's going to be something, and then turning it into that, we all acted like adults and went, huh, that was interesting. Thanks for the insight, and kept it moving. And I just don't get why we can't just act like adults. But part of the reason is, frankly, Logan, like, you got Booger McFarland, who played in the league and like won Super Bowls on ESPN, freaking out about it. And that's where I'm just like, I would ask you, like, what do you think the locker room reaction was? Because there are plenty of former players that actually were kind of leading the charge on the freak out, if you will.
Well, also, I think we had some people come in and like consult on the show today, right, about how to make the shows more engaging and how to make, like for the Commanders. And one of the things they're always talking about is how do you create conflict, because people watch conflict, right? So we're not getting to a point where like but he was kind of peeling back the curtain on some of these bigger TV shows, because we don't do this. We just we're kind of we're like, we just talk. Fred, Tana, and I, we just talk. He's saying, like, in the production meeting, they assign perspectives. So they're like, hey, I don't know if this is true. Booger might actually feel this way. I don't want to speak for Booger. But it might be like, hey, Booger, take the stance that you think this is ridiculous. And whoever else, take the stance that you think this is fine. And go at it. And that leads to good, engaging television, because that's how people talk. So I think that's also part of it, is that, like, this is something in a time of year that's kind of slow. Preseason football is not great. And it's going to catch a little bit of heat. So whatever. Like, I'll say, let me just say this last thing. So we had production meetings today for the preseason game, and we got to talk to Jack and EB and Ron and Katzer, all the coordinators. And EB comes in there, and his passion is evident from the second he sits down in the chair. His motivation, his love, and like I haven't played in 4 years or whatever, and I was like ready to run through a wall for the dude. So I'm 100% positive that the guys understand who he is and understand what he's doing. And I have no issue there's no doubt in my mind that he's the right guy and the right leader for the position. But that, even though you're right, doesn't mean you still don't have to kind of accommodate people's individual personalities. And I think that is essentially what the statement said. And I think, the other thing I think that's important to kind of note is, I don't think this happened yesterday. I think this happened during like OTAs, these conversations, right? So like, time has passed. They've learned each other. They understand what's going on. Like, I really, and people say, Logan, you always downplay stuff. On this, I genuinely believe this is not a big deal at all. Like, zero, like, it's not a big deal is basically my thoughts on it.
Yeah. You and I are on the same page. And I'm not always one to, like, I do think media freakouts are often silly, even though I'm a member of the media. And like, also, I said this yesterday on the show, I think this is important. Like, the media becomes this conglomerate of actual reporters and fans talking on social media, which I think is very silly, because then it becomes like media criticism. It's like, no actual reporter said that. But like the outside criticism, I think here is just, it's people looking to take shots based off preconceived notions. And that's on it. Like, I get that Ron could have been more tactful to avoid this, but I also like when people are honest and give candor. And so I appreciated the answer and just think we can handle it as adults, and thus we will move on.
Yeah.
Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. That is Logan Paulson. I am Craig Hoffman. Chick Hernandez, again, going to join us at the back end of the pod. So you and Chick are on the call with B. Mitch on Friday. As you mentioned, you had all the production meetings and stuff today. What are you expecting offensively, defensively, snaps, strategy, whatever you can share, top line items as you walk out of the meetings? Let's start with the offense. You walk out of the meeting with EB, you sprinkle in whatever Ron said. What's the most interesting thing to you to look forward to on Friday?
Yeah, I think the most interesting thing is just like the standard that they're trying to see from the guys. And it's kind of like what we talked about earlier in the week, like how it's not going to be perfect, but they want to see how guys handle adversity. They want to see how sharp it is. They want to see the tempo. They want to see the finish and the strain that's required to be a good football team in the NFL. And I think that's something that I can totally get behind. And as a coordinator, like at a much different level in high school, Like that's something you're always looking for is do the athletes, do the players that you're coaching understand what it takes to win. And we've talked a lot about the practice tempo, the practice energy, and how they're kind of cultivating this environment of strain and grind and like mental, kind of mental fatigue. And I think this is going to be an opportunity to see if it's paying off, right? Because like one of the things about this type of practice structure is if you're going at 100 miles an hour at the game when you have to go 85 or 90, everything's fine. Everything's really smooth. So I'm really curious to see how hard the guys are playing, the level of detail, how crisp it looks. I think that's something that I'm hoping to be pleasantly surprised by. Is usually that first preseason game, there's always, even with the ones there's like a holding, there's a formation, and I think because of the standard that's been set here by UB, I think that's something that we shouldn't see. So I'm expecting it to be very, very crisp. I'm expecting those guys to be, if it looks good, I think they'll get out, right? I think that's kind of what we were saying before, right? Like and that's kind of like standard operating procedure for offenses. If you look good, you're out. If it's not looking as crisp, you're going to get some more time on the field. And I think that's kind of what we were saying on whatever day that was, to Wednesday, right? We were saying that on Wednesday or Tuesday, whenever we last talked about it.
Whenever we did. What's a day? Who knows?
Yes, right. So I expect it to be that's kind of what I'm looking forward to, is aggressive, physical football that's very, very detail oriented, and I'm hoping that the team delivers because that's what they've been showing in practice, and I think that's the standard that EB set. So hopefully they can abide by that.
Yeah, no, I agree. One of the things I'm looking to is how quickly Sam gets the ball out. It feels like he's held it a little bit longer in practice, and it's actually something I've been meaning to ask you, so I will do that now. Have they been working on more down the field stuff, potentially some situations where it's like, Sam, don't hit your first read. We're going to want to work deeper in the progression? Because it does feel like the ball has not come out quite as quickly the last couple of practices, but I also know that the coaches have said like they're very sharp. They've made some plays, so it's not like they're not producing, but it hasn't been. And again, like we always talk about what's the setup of the drill, and sometimes it's kind of hard to tell in real time.
Sure.
But it like, has the ball been coming out in a manner that it's supposed to, based off the drill from what you can tell these last couple of practices?
I would tend to agree with you slightly that he has been holding the ball a little bit longer. I think a little bit of that is like the situation they did yesterday. They've done like 2 days of like red zone, one low red kind of goal line and one like mid red zone. And those situations tend to be tough, tight window throws. And
those have been interesting. Just to interject real quick, like they'll say like they run 8 plays and like 7 of them will hold the ball because that's what happens in the red zone. And then the other one, it's like one man show, option route. You are throwing the ball as soon as that guy breaks and praying. And you see that route, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And then, other than that, it's the hold it and see if a guy can shake loose.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that's part of the reason why he's been holding the ball a little longer. Obviously, like I just think the defensive backfield is doing a really good job too. And as much as we want to be like, Sam, like get the ball out, like there's times when you're watching practice and you're like, there is literally nowhere to go with the ball that you feel really good about. Like there's throwing windows and there's lanes, but it's like that's tight. And maybe you don't want the quarterback making those types of decisions, and they're just getting better and better at matching stuff. And I'm talking the defense here. And so the fact that he's holding the ball, I kind of think honestly, like when they go up against Cleveland, like it's going to be easy for Sam, easier in terms of finding throwing windows, finding lanes, because they're going against a group that's super dialed in right now. Like the pass rush is great. We haven't talked about Jamin or Cody Barton for a couple of days, but Jamin has been excellent in coverage the past couple of days and really making a ton of plays and tight coverage and matching the back at a high level. And Cody's, doing a great job. So like literally everybody on the defense is playing well. I can't think of one guy where I'm like, man, I wish that dude was playing better here. He's not meeting expectations. So he's going up kind of against a juggernaut in practice, which is something we've talked about. So even though he's been holding the ball a little bit longer, like to your point, I would expect that to be a non-issue in the game because I think you're going to see simpler coverage structures. You're going to see, kind of day 1, day 2 install stuff because that's kind of the standard, for preseason game 1. And I think, I think that's what you're going to see is you're going to see a more efficient, more on time Sam Howell. I would assume. Yeah.
I think it's been interesting too because they did give Sam some reps with the 2s the other day, and in an effort to keep his reps. At least I'm guessing it's to keep his reps high full complement of them while also letting Jacoby get a little bit of work with the ones. And I do wonder if Jacoby will see some work with the ones in the preseason to let him operate a little bit behind that one offensive line specifically. But I guess we'll find out on Friday. But, the two defensive backs are like Danny Johnson, who's played a lot of NFL football, Quan Martin, Jeremy Reeves, Percy Butler, like Rashad Wildgoose is out there, who's also out there a ton with the ones.
Sure.
Like, these DBs are good. When you get to the threes, like Jake Fromm, I think, is having a good camp in part because the guys he's throwing to, like, they've got 10 receivers that could make are worthy of making the roster. Yeah. And after you get to like the next, that 3-level, 4-level DB, that's where there's a decent enough drop off that you're like, oh, well, yeah, that's better. But like the two DBs have looked great. The depth back there. And it also, I think, is important to point that out because a lot of these guys, like a Quan Martin, like a Rashad Wildgoose, even Danny Johnson and Christian Holmes, like they have rotated their corners enough in camp that some of these guys are getting reps with the ones just to kind of get that practice. And there's not a drop-off. And that just shows the togetherness, the communication, the understanding of the scheme, the understanding of the responsibilities, not to mention the individual skill level pretty far down the depth chart of that back seven.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, obviously that first group, like St. Juice, Fuller, Forbes, Cam Curl, Forrest, then obviously there's a dabble of Percy Butler, a dabble of Wild Goose in there. That group is awesome. And then as you again, like you said, as you move down, twos are a little bit less efficient. Threes are significantly less efficient, right? So it kind of moves in tiers. So, Sam's going to go against the ones the whole time. And that group is really looking very, very sharp. So, I think this is that is going to be a little bit of a relief for Sam, when they get to the game. And I'm kind of excited to see, as I generally think that they've been operating the offense now I'm talking about, operating at such a high practice standard that when they get to the game, it'll feel easy for them. And I think that's kind of one of the objectives of this new practice tempo and structure.
How much do you think he will play? How much do you think he should play?
I don't know. It's first preseason game, so probably something like we've been talking about. If it goes well, probably not a lot. If it goes poorly, more. I don't have any exact number, but every team I've been on, that's kind of what it's been. It's so funny because coaches don't usually tell players, but when they do, it's like, oh man, we got a series, great. And then the series is a 3-and-out for the offense, and the coach is pissed, and the OC is like, we need to go back out there. You go back out there and it's like a 5-play sequence, and it's like that was bad. Let's do another one. And it's like, and then you get your 7 or 8 play drive that ends in a field goal or a touchdown. It's like, okay, that was good. Everyone wants to end on a good note. So if the good note happens right away, great. Everyone's excited. If the good note happens later, it's going to happen later. So, and I think it's the same thing for the defense. Like everyone wants to come out and feel very confident about the product they're putting on the field, offensively and defensively. And if that happens right away, twos, put the helmets on. Let's go out there. Let's play a lot of football. If not, I don't know. I don't think they'll make it to half because I think it's so early in the preseason. Yeah. But I think it could be longer than people think potentially.
I kind of hope so because I didn't get the chance to ask Rivera about this. I don't know if people know this. We may have spent a few minutes on at the start of the podcast. There were other things that were discussed the past couple of days, but I didn't get a chance to ask Rivera how he's going to handle the preseason in total, which is something I was hoping to ask him, but he did kind of answer it in part in other questions. And he said, like, that third preseason game, don't expect to see starters. And I was like, that's interesting because, as we've talked about on this show, you typically don't get a ton of game reps after you joint practice against a team.
Yeah.
I kind of think they are. Like, I feel like they're going to practice against Baltimore, play against Baltimore. And that is, again, different than the way they handle it. And that might be in part, I don't think that business decisions impact football a ton, but like it is the only home preseason game. So maybe they want to get them a little bit more action, getting used to FedEx Field, whatever the routines and how everything is there. Like, I don't know. Obviously it's the first game of the Josh Harris era, but like that should not impact your preseason. But I have no idea what goes into some of these decisions. And it could be any number of factors. I tend to think it's just like, hey, we're going to handle this like the regular preseason. And I would argue that that's a small mistake and not a catastrophic one, not one that's going to impact the season like in any major way, but just I would say that's not optimized. If it was me, making this decision, I would do some in this first game, very little in the second game, a ton in not a ton, but like play a half in the final game.
Sure.
In part two, because you have 2.5 weeks at that point until your first regular season game, and I don't want it to be almost a full month of no football against another team. But it does sound like they're going to handle this like most teams have handled the preseason since the change from 4 to 3, where they're going to play some this week, more next week, and then very little, and it's kind of on the roster cut guys to make the team in week 3.
Yeah, well, I think it's important for, you and I to remember that they probably have 44 roster spots pretty penciled in right now.
Yeah, if not more.
Yeah, I'd say 40. I'd say 44 is a reasonable number with maybe a couple question marks. So let's say a solid 40, 42 for sure making the team. That's like 10 slots you're working on right now, right? So over the next couple of weeks, like if they get those 10 slots really like ironed out and you know exactly what's going on, like I don't want any of those guys playing, right? And everybody else, all these young guys can play and have a great time and get some film in that third game. And I've been a part of teams that have done that, like since kind of the new CBA was when I kind of identified that as a thing that was happening more. So, as much as we want to see guys and they got to get reps, like they're taking 100 reps in practice on the regular. Like they're getting a ton of reps. They're looking sharp. And so just do what you got to do to get out of this sucker healthy, I think is ultimately what it boils down to, while making sure you're prepared for week 1. Like where is that tipping point? And so I think that makes what Ron said makes sense to me. Even though like kind of from a preparatory standpoint, it kind of would maybe make a little more sense to get maybe some more reps in the third game. But again, maybe the risk isn't worth the reward. Yeah.
I think we get, like, if you're going to play a little bit more in one of the two, right, with the second or the third, I think there's this, like, I don't know if it's like a cousin of recency bias, if you will. I don't know what the exact terminology I'm looking for here is, but like, oh, if it happens if it happens earlier, then it's better. As opposed to like, oh, you're so close to the season now, you made it this far. How could you? And it's like, they're the same reps. What's the difference if they happen in week 2 versus week 3 versus like from a ramp up optimization for the readiness side of the equation versus the risk side of the equation? Like, I actually think the readiness side gets helped. Again, I'm talking about, I don't know, I'm talking about the margins here. It's outside the box. Nobody does it that way. Anytime you do something the way that other people don't, there's inherent risk of you looking like an idiot. It's easy for me to sit here and say this stuff into a microphone. It's not my team. I don't have a new owner that's looking at my every move and examining my job for the future. But it is one of those things that everybody does it the same way, and I'm not actually sure that it's the best way, but I also understand kind of why it happens and don't think ultimately it's that big of a deal.
Sure, I agree.
Last thing for us before we talk to Mr. Chick, or I talk to Mr. Chick. Meetings today. Schedule, not great.
Yeah, not great.
Who's your August hero favorite? There's one of these every year where it's like, who's the guy who wins August? And then you're like, man, I don't know. He makes the team, and then you don't see him again until next August.
Yeah. Gosh, I think there's a couple guys that like are.
Let's shout them out. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do offensive guys first. Obviously, there's the two offensive linemen we've been talking about. John Smith, the guard, and Mason Brooks are guys that I think are playing good football right now. And obviously, the preseason game is going to be a big deal for those guys. And, if you want to cut another guy in that group that I think for sure going to make the team a little different category is Chris Paul. He's had an excellent, past 5 days of practice. Yeah. And I think you look at the receivers, and obviously the top, John's been the best. But then you go down the depth chart, you say Dax is good, Bieniemy's been good. And then those 4 young receivers are all doing a good job. Casimir Allen's been getting some more reps with the twos. You see how explosive he is. You see Tinsley kind of, again, you see his polish. The production hasn't matched that yet, in terms of him getting a lot of catches in practice, but he's
made a couple. His catches have come in the end zone, which is not a bad place to have them.
Right. But it's not been like Bryson Tremaine, who catches like three balls in a practice, or Sample, who's catching. It's like, it's a very specific time for Tinsley, but I do think he's maybe the most polished receiver. So it'll be interesting to see kind of that group of guys in the preseason, who differentiates himself, who's on teams. But I think they're really lucky. I mean, I don't know. All those guys were undrafted free agents, and they're all doing a really good job. The tight ends, obviously, Cole Turner is a special football player. He's going to get a lot of burn. I'm curious to see how much he actually plays. We'll see.
Yeah.
Curtis Hodges, I want to see play a ton.
Yeah, he has not had a good camp. I actually, when I did my latest roster projection, I do not have him on right now.
So it's interesting because I think it's so funny, man. Like we got, this will take like 5 seconds, but the stuff he's doing in line is good. The stuff he's doing from a route running standpoint is good. It's just, I think what you're referring to is the lack of consistency in finishing, which we've talked about for the last like 10 days or so. So does getting him in a preseason environment change that for him, you know? And the other guy who's had a really good last couple of days is Dylan. Is that his name?
Yeah, 46.
Yeah, he's actually done a nice job. And like, I thought he was no way in hell he's going to make the team. But again, eyes on both those guys for the preseason. That kind of fleshes out the offense, in my opinion. Obviously, Chris Rodriguez. But in terms of guys that I think really could be big burners, those young receivers, those young offensive linemen, and one of those tight ends, I think, is going to step forward and make
So I'll take Mason Brooks is going to mop somebody. And I'm a big Mason Brooks fan, as is everyone else at this point. And I'll go with Tinsley. I think he's going to score once or twice, and I think he's got big, like, we called it the Rashad Ross Award last year, and I think we can continue that because
I like that.
Old Rocket Ross, that guy crushed the preseason. So I'll go Tinsley, and I'll go Mason Brooks.
That's a very solid 2. I think that's a good 2. And then I think you always have to say, let me just say, you have to say a running back always because like they get like 1,000 carries at some point in the season. So I'm going to say Chris Rodriguez has a big game.
You want to know who I think has got big potential to be like Jared Patterson a couple years ago? Gore. I think it's Nick Gore, 38.
Oh, yeah.
New kid they signed who's played for EB in Kansas City.
Yeah.
You want a guy who like is the EB model of every single play. If you're the ball carrier, you sprint to the end zone. It doesn't matter how many guys fake tackle you because it's camp and nobody actually tackles because they're not allowed to and they're not supposed to. He finishes and like, he's quick. He's fast. Like I could see him getting a lot of carries and doing well with them.
Yeah, I agree for sure. So defense now?
Let's hit a defense. I don't know what I don't have a guy that's like. I mean, in a way, it's like the Jeremy Reeves Award. He just kept making the team, and all of a sudden, he's the first All Pro they've had in a decade. But who's the all preseason team nominee?
So just going by position, I think Andre Jones has looked pretty sharp in practice the past couple of days, and he kind of looks like that guy. And he's a guy like, Marcus White. Remember Marcus White from back in like 2011 or 2012? Like big athletic defensive end who has like 2 sacks and a forced fumble in a preseason game. Like I could definitely see that happening for him. KJ Henry is doing better, and he's 5th round pick. Maybe he kind of sparks and comes to life. Keep an eye on both those guys. I'm higher on Andre Jones. I actually mentioned him on the show today. And then linebackers, I think Milo would be a guy. Milo, Kalik, but Kalik's kind of already established.
Yeah, you can't count Kalik. He's going to make the team and might start.
Yeah. And then on the back end, golly, I feel like there's a young safety that's been really doing a great job, and I just cannot remember. Oh, number 41 from Illinois.
DJ Sturgis.
Kendall Smith. Isn't that the guy from Illinois? Is that his
name? 41. Kendall Smith is 40.
40, yeah. So 40.
Yeah.
And he has flashed a little bit around the ball, but he was also very productive in college. So I'm kind of hoping that he's a gamer a little bit and comes up with like a turnover or, big hit or something. And those are guys from the back end that I'm kind of like, that's one guy. Just because of his college production, I'm like, just circle that guy and see what happens.
Apologies to Derek Gore, not Nick Gore. Old 38, running fast, last name only, Gore, first name Derek. Apologies there. I got 2 guys for you. I shouted out Terrell Burgess the other day. I feel like he's got a solid, made some plays in camp. So we'll see what he does. But a guy that I keep just like, who's that big fella rumbling down the field, making stuff happen? Abdullah Anderson, big 92.
Dude, he has been flashing a little bit, and he's a
You're
guy.
You're like, wait, who's that guy?
He's played football. He was on an active roster last year. He was on Atlanta's roster, wasn't he?
I don't know about that. He's he's got 3 years of experience. He's 27, so it's not like he's a super young guy. But I could see him making a couple of plays. I mean, Gore's 28. It's not necessarily a young guy who's gonna be like a future player. It's just like who's gonna be good in the preseason.
Yeah. That's a
And
good.
I'll go Abdullah Anderson, big old 92.
But he is a guy that he flashes in one-on-ones, and you can tell like he's the guy that it was like me actually. He's got a lot of experience that's going to be playing with guys who are not as good later in the game, and could have a lot of explosive plays going against a less experienced offensive line. But I will say this is something I wanted to point out before we end. Cleveland Browns offensive line, very deep and very good. So
They got some guys, and they're
yes.
Callahan coached, aren't they?
Yeah, they are Callahan coach, so a lot of chip help, a lot of play action, a lot of heavy jump sets, all that kind of stuff. So it'll be a good test, I think, for the ones, the twos, and the threes. And William, our producer, just said 16 games started, so I don't know if he qualifies for what this award.
Yeah,
right?
maybe not. But like he's definitely on the line of making the team. So like I think in that way he counts.
Yeah, but it's like he's been in the league.
Sure.
That's my thought on that. So maybe pick another one.
Well, I don't have another one. That was my bad. He's a guy. He qualifies because I didn't know his name before camp started, and now I do. That's
Correct.
My qualification.
He does flash. What's his name? There's another guy we should shout out. 79.
Benning Potoye.
Yeah, he was on the team last year. He played some games, but he is a guy that I think on the defensive line, in addition to those two edge rushers, that could make some waves because of his play style. Very aggressive hands. Good athlete for being a bigger guy. So he's a guy, I'd circle him too. If you're looking for a guy maybe with a little bit less experience than Anderson. So
there you go. All right. Let's talk to Chick Hernandez, and then we'll come back, wrap things up here on Take Command. Our guest today is the play-by-play voice of the Commanders for this preseason. Longtime broadcaster in the D.C. area, been covering the team for a long time. Play-by-play in other places as well. We call him Mr. Chick. You might have heard of him, Chick Hernandez. Welcome to Take Command, man.
Do you know the origin of Mr. Chick?
I don't know the origin story of Mr. Chick, but I would love to hear it.
Okay, so Alfred Morris gets drafted, and I'm the first person to get him. I go and get him from his hometown and do a nice interview. I said, I'll see you in a few weeks for OTAs. OTAs happen. We go in the locker room, and you know how the locker room works. We all start to gather. Alfred's got his back to us as he's getting himself prim and proper, and he turns around and looks at me and goes, "Oh, Mr. Chick." And at that point, I looked over at Mike Jones and John Keim and went, "This is not good." I knew it was going to stick from that. I knew it. And as soon as we got out of the locker room, Jonesy's like, "Hey, Mr. Chick." I'm like, "Oh, here we go." And it stuck, it's a nice little, little honor. And I put it on my Twitter handle. Makes more sense. So there's your origin.
That's great. It's also the last interview Alfred Morris ever did.
He did get a little grumpy.
Wasn't psyched to do much by the end. We got one really good interview out of him in 2015 or 2016 because I was doing the show with Santana, and let me tell you, doing the show with Santana Moss has its perks. You sir,
no
though,
question.
Yeah, you sir will be getting to work with a guy that everyone on this podcast is quite familiar with because he's typically here for it. That is Logan Paulson. You guys are on the call. It's you, B. Mitch, and Logan for the call. How do you prepare for play-by-play on a preseason game? Because there's obviously a ton of players. You don't really know how the game flow is going. It's not like the result really matters. So how are you thinking about calling these games over the next couple of weeks?
180 players total. I'm also getting ready for my CBS gig for college football, so I'm getting ready for that game as well, Liberty and La Tech, I think. So I've got a lot of names and numbers in my head. But the way this goes, and it's great that I have these two guys, and B. Mitch and Logan, because I know B. Mitch can tell a story, and his story of him coming into the league and never having returned a punt or a kick in his life until the NFL, and where he should be a future Hall of Famer. Now is that story alone is worth the price of admission, and Logan's story as well. And Logan has taken the bull by the horns when it comes to the prep, right, and the intel on a team, and that's huge. I love listening to him, and we have to figure out a way that both those guys can get their points across. But as you said, I mean, the outcome of the game is not the biggest deal. We're looking to see who is getting their name called. And off of that, when the fourth string is in and they're trying to make a squad and we've got to tell some stories, well, then I can lean on those two guys who've been there, done that. And the fact that I work with B Mitch for 14 years gives me a little bit of background for him. And Logan and I have spent a few minutes here and there together. We just got finished, having a coaches meeting and gleaned some stuff from them for the broadcast. So it's just about storytelling and perspective from those two. I'm trying to get out of the way. I mean, I literally am just going to call the play and get out of the way. And what's going to be interesting is B Mitch is in the booth and Logan's on the field. Historically, that position's been an interview person. He will take care of interviews, but we really want him incorporated into the color analysis of it. So that's going to be interesting to see how that works between him and B Mitch, because visually we can't see him. So our producer's got to be really good on Logan's got something and let him go. So it'll be fun. And we only got 2 games, unfortunately, because they made the Ravens game a Monday nighter, so ESPN took that. But this will be fun, man. And being out at camp, there's a bunch of great young talent out there that are doing some things, and the vibe, the atmosphere is completely flipped 180 from the last 24 years.
Yeah, the atmosphere is going to be different. I'm actually curious, what do you think? I know the Arizona game week 1 is going to be nuts. It's going to be sold out. FedEx is going to be awesome. What do you think? And obviously that's not this week, but when they eventually get to FedEx Field, what do you think the preseason vibe will be at FedEx Field? Will that also be a big deal, or will that just be a warm-up act?
I think it'll be a big deal. The fan base has been starving for positivity out of this organization, and with the ownership change and what the Josh Harris and company, what they've done, even in their short time as the ownership group, shaking hands and small things like this is gonna sound funny, but providing ice cream for media. Okay, I mean it's a small little thing, but that's hey, someone thought about us on a 99-degree day. Okay, that would never have taken place in the previous 24 years. I hate to bring that up, but that's the way it is.
Sure.
So I think the fan base. I said it. The fan base is going to come back. They left. I mean, they flat out left because they were ticked off at having to spend 2 paychecks and a horrible product. They're going to get a better bang for their buck coming back to FedEx Field, and they're excited. So I think the fan base is going to be back, and that in turn for the guys who've been here, done that with the burgundy and gold, they're going to see a difference as well. Which you can't fake energy. Right, and they're going to provide that, and I think it's going to be cool to watch for sure.
For sure, we'll get to the football in a second. Last question on this though, because I'm curious. This is a team-produced broadcast. That's how all the preseason broadcasts work. Right. We know B Mitch is going to be honest anytime, anywhere. Both of us that know you know that you're going to be honest. But there's let me be as brutal as I can be, but also professional. There's a sure. Slider there. As you guys prepare for this game, the first game of the Josh Harris era, is that on the topic list to talk about at some point during the game?
I haven't seen that. I mean, we've been given a list of the B-rolls, the videos that of players and stuff. I know me, and we haven't been told to not talk about any topic. So I mean, we were talking about in our pre-production meeting. I mean, the first thing out of my mouth is going to be brand new day. It's a brand new day. It's a brand new vibe, ownership group, so it's gonna be discussed. And we don't have to disparage the previous owner. All we got to do is talk about, because that's what fans don't care anymore. Fans want to talk about what's coming, and that's the flat out truth. So there's been, it's a team produced broadcast, and I'm sure if someone's having a horrible game, we might be lighter. I'm not sure B Mitch would be, but I don't have to be. I can just call the action, right?
Right.
I can just call the action. But no, they've given us, free reign to do what we're going to do. And I think they certainly hired the 2 former players, who are very honest. Me, it's simple. I'm honored that I got asked to do it. I'm excited about it. And for a kid who grew up in Silver Spring, Maryland, to call the hometown franchise's preseason games, which I did before for a few years with Joe at the Heisman. But that was a different regime, and there were some edicts handed down. There's no edicts with this one.
So the football. Obviously, Sam Howell is the story. With kind of 1A, 1B with the offensive line, they're very related. But is there anything in particular that you look for in Howell, or that after your conversations with the coaches that they're looking for in Howell that we should be looking for as we watch you guys on Friday?
I think it's just for Sam Howell, it's decision making and consistency. Simple as that. Just, if you make the right decision, it's okay if you make a mistake, but they want to see the right decision made on a consistent basis. That's what they're looking for from Sam Howell. That's what anybody is looking for from the QB1, is to have that. He has made strides from OTAs to now. Coach is very happy with what he's done. It's funny because we document training camp, or you guys document training camp. And when it's put on Twitter, oh, he threw 2 picks today. It really, for the coaching staff, for Eric Bieniemy and company, they're looking, with the picks made out of a poor decision or just trying to force the ball in some place, and so it's consistency for Sam Howell, and I would expect to see him in that first quarter, certainly starting the game. And if things go well, I don't think you see him for long.
That's interesting. And the other thing too, Chick, is I wonder if you guys got to talk about this with the coaches. Like, typically when you have a joint practice with a team, you do not actually play the players a ton in that game. So, right, they'll play Baltimore, or they'll have the joints with Baltimore, and then they'll play the game. And you would imagine that most of the work happens for the starters in the actual practices, not in that game. And then Ron already said, we're not going to play them a ton in that third and final preseason game. So how much do you expect to see, and how much, both, like, how much do you expect, and then you're a man with opinions and you're allowed to have them. How much should we see these guys, and specifically a guy like Howell, who does need the reps, does need the experience, or at least it seems that he would, based off the fact that he doesn't have it from previous years?
Yeah, it's amazing to me, when I first came up, there was 6 preseason games, and then it was 4. Yeah, 6. I see your face. Right?
I actually didn't know that was a thing.
There was a 6 preseason game. This is long time ago. And then it went to 4. And it was like, oh, they're cutting down to 4. And now it's down to 3. I would expect to see Sam Howell for the first quarter. Like I said, if things go really, really well, it won't be the first quarter. What I'd like to see him play the first quarter.
Thanks again to Chick Hernandez. No thanks to Chick's phone and the fact that it saved itself from overheating by shutting off in the middle of the interview, but glad we got a good 12, 13 minutes in with Mr. Chick. Of course, Chick, Logan, B. Mitch on the call on Friday. Real quick before we go, Logan, shout out to our producer, exiting, Nick Berlansky. This is his last episode. We're happy to have our new producer, young William Foshi, with us today in the room as well. But Nick has been our producer for most of the last 6-7 months. He took on the job and has done just a phenomenal job. Works his tail off. Super professional. He made on-camera appearances doing Nick's numbers. He had his own segment to help us get through the doldrums of the off season. So he's got a great new job lined up with Sports Illustrated. We're going to miss him here in the Odyssey family, and we'll certainly miss him here on Take Command.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot, Nick. You were great, and you did a freaking fantastic job, bud. Good luck with everything. And he's getting married soon, so congrats on that too. Yeah,
congrats. I think this weekend. He's leaving us. He's going to go get married. He just start a job, a new man. Love to see it. He's put in the chat. Oh, yeah, Saturday. Oh, yeah. Yeah, just, forgot about that. How could I slip my mind? That is a weird thing. Logan, I don't remember to your wedding. I'm coming up on my 1 year, but it's like, that's like coming up soon. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, it's the Wednesday before. There's not I don't know, something should feel different, but it's just Wednesday. And then on Saturday, I'm going to be married.
Dude, that's crazy. You guys, a year? I think I'm on 11. And I've been with my wife for 17 years. So it's we're in it. We've been in it for a while.
You don't remember that long ago.
I don't remember, yeah. And no. CTE is a real deal, so.
And on that note, we'll see you to review the game on Monday here on Take Command. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command. First, why don't you like it? It lets other people know that it was good. And then they should watch it too. And Logan, we have a new exclusive home for full episodes.
We do. 1067 The Fans YouTube page. Go check it out and please subscribe.
Yeah, do what Logan said.
Do
He's
it.
Very, very smart.